My name is Alex Pole and I'm a blacksmith. So it started about 32 years ago. I was brought up in London, so I was kind of based in London in my early teens. Went to go and study architecture at the Polytechnic of Central London. Failed miserably at architecture, but while I was on the course there was a module, so there was an external program that I could go on, and it was jewellery making. And I kind of remember the first time walking through the door of the jewellery studio, and I thought this is what I'm going to be doing for many years now. And then I spent 4 or 5 years just studying jewellery, but at the art college that I was in there was also a blacksmithing workshop next door, so that's how it progressed into the blacksmithing. So it's kind of moved from architecture a little bit, a lot of photography when I was younger as well, and then into the jewellery, into the metalwork. And this is where we are now. So when I was starting, I mean, I've always been fascinated by, you know, buildings and structure and construction and making things, and I think there was a natural progression in a way from studying architecture, which was supposed to be a sensible, proper career for a person of my social standing, into the jewellery making, which was into the world of metalwork really. And then that has progressed from a smaller scale using precious materials to a larger scale, following on to where we are now. So the scale has gone smaller again. 6 or 7 years ago I made a very kind of succinct decision to specialise, and so I wanted to specialise in kitchenware, and so that's what we do now at the Forge Kitchen. The brand is the Forge Kitchenware, and this is exclusively eating, drinking utensils, cooking equipment, anything to do with the kitchen. So the first type of blacksmithing I did was architectural blacksmithing. So there's different kind of categories within the blacksmithing world, I suppose, or career, or whatever you want to call it. So you have architectural blacksmiths and artist blacksmiths and production blacksmiths. So originally I started off, I suppose, somewhere in between the architectural and the artistic side. So we were making much bigger scale ironwork. So gates for houses and gardens, railings, furniture, chandeliers. So it was kind of hardware. And then that kind of progressed a little bit more into sculptural furniture, a lot of fabrication, high spec furniture for companies up in London, but it was very, very varied. So it could be a door latch one day, we did a 7.5 ton steel floor for a shop in East London, you know, and everything in between. So it's incredibly varied. Yeah, so after leaving college, I was moving around a lot. I think by nature I have a very restless soul. I was moving, I think in the space of 5 years I lived in 30 different locations across the UK, and I would move with my tools, either set up a small workshop or work for other blacksmiths and jewellers. So at that time, in the mid to late 90s, I was working both as a jewellery maker and a blacksmith simultaneously. So sometimes I would set up a jewellery workshop and I would just make stuff. Other times I would go and work in a forge or work for someone, moving, travelling around. I spent quite a long time in Spain, quite a long time in France. I spent 8 years in West Australia, all sorts. I've always been travelling, you know, and taking my metalwork with me. So from all the travels in Australia, 2007 we moved back from Australia temporarily my wife got pregnant, we decided to stay, moved down to Somerset, and that's when I set up a small forge there. And I was, still doing the architectural stuff, but it was beginning to wear me out a bit, to be honest. So about 6 or 7 years ago, when I moved into this location where we are now in South Somerset, kind of began to lose the love for it, really. And this is quite a long kind of journey we're going to go on, how I get to where I am now. So you imagine we've had a pretty good recession a few years ago. I've got a 2-3-year-old son, another one on the way. We don't have any money. I'm really tired. I basically locked the workshop and walked away and said, I've had enough. I couldn't carry on physically, mentally, financially. We were broke. And my lovely wife said, look, just take a couple of weeks, finish all your jobs and go back into the workshop and just make something for yourself. And I started making a few very, very basic knives. I have no formal training in knife making whatsoever. I had no idea what I was doing. There wasn't really YouTube, Instagram that much. I just kind of started making up, and I thought that was really fulfilling. And at the same time, I decided to sort of just kind of, pull my socks up a bit and try and sort myself out. So I booked a trip to go to Sweden. And I thought one of the good things to do is learn some new techniques, And so I booked a trip to go to Sweden, to go to a very famous axe making factory called Gränsfors Bruks. And on the side of the factory is a blacksmithing school. And I went on an 8-day course. I met my now present master, so one of my teachers. The course was incredible. Different skills, different tool making. It was an axe making course, but actually I really discovered a love of knife making. I also discovered I was really bad at making axes. So terrible at making axes actually at that point. But I thought we've just got to change. I can't, I'm either just going to leave the business or you're just finding yourself doing work that you're not inspired by. I think actually it was March the 14th, and I can remember it very clearly because I was standing right where we're sitting now. I made a decision, and it must have been about 9 years ago, and it was a kind of spring afternoon. I went, right, we're just going to make kitchenware. And I can still picture it so clearly. It's one of those kind of major points in your life. It's like going into the jewelry workshop for the first time. It's like, explosion of lights again. This is it. The hairs still stand up on my arm. And it's like, I love eating. I love drinking way too much. And I love the passion and the creativity and the craft that I've spent half my life working in. And that's where Forge Kitchenware was born, really. It was a kind of one of those lovely light bulb moments, and I'm thinking, right, and so it took a few years. It's taken about 5 years in all to move away from all the architectural work, move away from all the other customers, spending 2 or 3 years just saying no to people. I think at one time I was turning down about 70 grand's worth of work a year, given I was probably only making about £12,000 a year to live off. So it was quite an extreme decision. Everyone thought it was completely bonkers, why would you do that? And slowly over time we developed the range, developed contacts with the chefs, and that's kind of led to where we are now. It's just getting into the food world, getting into the food movement, getting organic, getting sustainable, all these things that are kind of catchwords nowadays, but putting my particular take of the craft and my skills and my background and my passions into a very kind of specialist area. So the first bit of kitchenware I made, probably spoons, for one of the first things that I've made that you can use in the kitchen. And I'm obsessed with spoons. I mean, I used to make spoons out of silver and gold, and they looked more like Sydney Opera House than they did for anything. And I would make them for jewelry collectors and silverware collectors. And so I've always had a passion for the spoon. I'm still obsessed by spoons. I don't really know why. So it's a kind of fundamental item, isn't it? It's one of those kind of, with a spoon you can survive. You can, stir your tea or whatever. I think for the business, the first thing I was making was for a restaurant up in London. A chef came to me. I was doing a show at the River Cottage, and he said, can you make me some plates for my kitchen? And he had seen some of these forged plates that I was doing, very shallow dishes, more like a kind of serving dish, I suppose. And he said, but can you make them so that they are dishwashable. I want 100 of them. And so I developed what we now call black stainless steel. And it was a bit of a revelation for me. So what happens when you take stainless steel, when you forge it, it goes black. It creates an oxide surface. Now, most sensible people take that oxide off, which uses acids and machines. And what I discovered is the oxide is in itself rust-proof if you treat it properly. So we created plates that looked like they were 100 years old. They looked like they were blacksmithy in inverted commas and all forged, but you could put them in an industrial dishwasher. And they're still going today, you know. And so that was a kind of another one of those moments where you think, wow, people actually want to buy kitchenware. They want to buy this kind of stuff. And that is another route to why, you know, where we are now. The journey of the development of the kitchenware range really started with making frying pans. And I'd searched for years for someone to be able to make me a kind of a blank, a kind of like a hollow vessel, like a frying pan base that was just raw steel that I could then attach handles to that were forged. So we're obviously blacksmiths, we spend our time forging stuff. There is a traditional craft or trade, more so, it's not so much a craft, very skilled, called spinning. And I kind of had looked for 2 or 3 years to find people who would spin carbon steel, raw steel plates so that we could have frying pan bases. And funnily enough, just one day I found these guys and they happened to only be 2 or 3 hours away. And I started communicating with them and they said, yeah, I mean, people have been spinning frying pans for hundreds of years. It's a traditional way of making hollowware, which is the generic term for it. And this is a revelation. I'm thinking we can make frying pans. You can forge a frying pan, but it takes an awfully long time and a lot of muscle and heat and blood and sweat and tears to have a relatively raw product. And that was a real leap for us in the range. And we had a few dozen made and we sold them instantly. And so we had a few more made and then we sold them and then we increased the size of the range. And that kind of led on to, so you've got a frying pan, what else are we going to make for the kitchen that sort of goes with it? And that's the utensil range started to develop. We started making the blades and the bowls out of copper, because not that you really should, but if you're going to use a metal utensil on a metal pan, it wants to be softer. Technically, we make serving utensils. They're not really for stirring stews, but they're more for serving, but it's quite elegant. And then, of course, as we all know, barbecuing and the rise of the fire cook has been phenomenal. So we developed a whole range of barbecue tools as well. As well as making kitchenware, we also make chef's knives and we also make axes. It's a bit of a stretch of the imagination, but if one can imagine you use your axe to chop your wood, you light your fire, you use your knife to prep, you use your frying pan to cook in, you use your utensils to stir, and on and on and on. And we also make table cutlery. So you can, in effect, go from the forest all the way to the table. And our tools and utensils will take you all the way through that kind of progression. The alchemy of blacksmithing. What is the alchemy of blacksmithing? And in a sense, blacksmithing is alchemy. I mean, we all have a kind of, Harry Potter-esque version of what alchemy is, which is turning lead into gold. And in a sense, that's quite correct of all creativity, of anything that you make. You take a raw material, we apply heat, and we apply our imagination. We also apply our strength, water, wind. So we apply the elements to a base material, the physicality of making, to create something that is more and above the original material. So something of beauty. For us here at the Forge, it's not just things of beauty, it's also things of function. Something that someone can use, and they can use it for 100 years. And that, for me, I think is, we've spoken a little bit about the past and the jewelry and the architecture and how we've got here. And I think the kind of culmination of all of those things is to be able to make an object that simply you can just go out and use straight away. And you can use it every day, or our customers can use every day. And it does something. For me to forge an axe, to put a handle, or to very kindly ask Joe, my assistant, to put a handle on it, because I'm not very good at woodwork, and to go down to the orchard and to chop a tree up and process that wood and forge a blade and use that wood to make a knife handle, to chop a steak, to eat it. I mean, that is magic to me, and that's what we're really about, is turning this kind of base stuff into the magic of making and creativity. So the processes involved in the forge, it's quite linear in a sense. So the steel is delivered. We use a couple of different steel stockists. It's cut into 3-meter lengths and stored at one end of the forge. And it is a little bit factory-like in a sense that so the steel is then cut into smaller sections. These are given to the smiths. They'll be forged. We use propane gas forges, but we also use all the traditional techniques. So it is traditionally forged. We just have a more contemporary approach, or we have just updated how things are done. So we have 2 mechanical hammers in the forge. We have a 25-ton hydraulic press, and we have the traditional anvils, swage blocks, tongs, hammers, and so everything is forged traditionally. When the basic shapes and patterns are forged, they will then move down the workshop to the grinding stations, which are at one end of the workshop. So we do any profiling, refining of the shape, drilling of holes, and then all the pieces are taken to, we have what's called a vibro polisher, which is essentially a giant bucket of stone chips that shakes, vibrates. What that does is it very gently polishes the surface of the steel, and then everything moves to our secondary workshop space, which is next door, and all the assembly is done there. So if we have done some copper work, we'll do all the riveting next door. The pan handles go to Steve in the pan room, and then that's where all the assembly is done. Once the product is finished, it's pretty much all wrapped in wax paper, boxed, and then it's taken off to the office where it's boxed and processed and sent out to the customers. Up until 2019, we were making all the product, all the kitchenware, when we'd converted completely to kitchenware, and we were going out and doing markets. So we used to do a monthly market in a town nearby, and then we would do festivals, 6 or 7 festivals a year, and then a big market at Christmas that was on for 3 weeks, and that was sustaining us. What also we used to do a lot of is teaching. So we ran courses here at the Forge, and that was probably about a 60-40 split. So teaching about 40%, 60% making and selling product. Obviously, in 2020, we had COVID and we had a lockdown, and we lost all our business, as did so many people. After a small break, which, you know, I have to be honest in the fact that I really enjoyed the lockdown. I hadn't stood still or stopped for 10 years. Interestingly enough, there was a very positive side in the fact that it allowed me to stop, take a break, reassess, and also it allowed a couple of months, and especially with some help and grants from the government, to build a website and to go online. So pre-2019, we didn't sell any product online at all. We had no e-commerce at all. I think May the 1st, probably 2020, we launched the website, and it just exploded. I mean, we went from me full-time, Joe mostly full-time, Steve coming in part-time. Now, currently, we have 4 full-time, 1 part-time, and other people helping in various other places. At one stage, we had 7 of us working in here. So it was quite a rapid rise from doing the festivals and the markets to now running an e-commerce business, and that's how we regard ourselves pretty much. We stopped the teaching. Production became too busy. We needed the space. And also during the pandemic, stopping, starting, same as the restaurant industry, you know, it was just, it's too much to manage really. So, and it's also created more focus. So the time spent traveling to festivals, traveling to markets, loading up, unloading, setting up, all of these things actually consumed a huge amount of time. So We spent the latter half of 2020 just focusing on developing the product range. So obviously website, we need enough product. I've got hundreds of designs we can call on. That was pretty easy. Photography, and it just started to expand all over the world now. And that's the beauty of an internet business. It's a little bit impersonal sometimes. We don't have that engagement with our customers, but you can bring your personality into a website, into your social media, into how you present yourself. Probably to the latter half of 2021, we started to get more involved in the restaurant business. So it's a slightly grand term, I have a restaurant agent. Matt is a friend of mine, he's a wonderful guy, has an amazing business, and he finds different craftspeople and he marries them up with restaurants, or a chef will go to him and ask for a specific type of dish, or he will present a ceramicist, a woodworker, a blacksmith, a glass blower to a restaurant, and they create the range of tableware. And that side of the business is kind of booming. Now, I'm not a great one for long-term forward planning. I think the immediate future is going to be to consolidate what has happened over the last 2 years. So we've grown possibly 10 times in size in the last 2 years, probably a little bit less. So the future is going to be to stabilize, to consolidate what we've got. We'll probably move to a bigger premises or make this premises bigger, so we will expand the business a little bit, but without losing any of the quality of the stuff that we make. And we are going to develop more of our axe making side of the business, so that will become a little bit more commercial. And potentially what is on the cards at the moment is moving into making garden tools. So we will apply the same philosophies, techniques, ways of presenting things, the same brand, but to garden tools.